Welcome to the Security Weekly News wrap-up for the week of 6 June 2021. Bezos in space, Steam, VMware, lots of ransomware stuff, Siloscape, TikTok, and more on this Security Weekly News wrap-up show.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Cyber criminals are working overtime. They're leveraging activity around the COVID vaccine to disguise phishing attacks, hoping to steal money or personal information from your employees or customers. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner is a free tool you can use right now to help protect your business and ultimately your reputation. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner analyzes your Office 365 accounts and identifies malicious emails that slip past your gateway and into inboxes. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email. Use the Barracuda Email Threat Scanner for free right now at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. With the skills gap increasing, it's more important than ever to train your staff effectively and efficiently. Offensive Security provides training for your organization designed by the same minds behind Kali Linux. Here are two recent offerings from OffSec. OffSec Academy gives you the chance to earn industry-leading OSCP certification with dedicated one-on-one mentoring. You can also try Proving Grounds Enterprise, created exclusively by Offensive Security's InfoSec experts for highly realistic simulated networks. Visit securityweekly.com/OffSec to learn more.
All right, I'm Doug White from Roger Williams University, and welcome to the Security Weekly News wrap-up show. Let's wrap all show topics for the week. On Application Security Weekly number 153, Mike and Tyler Robinson had Daniel Hampton, the Senior Solutions Architect at Fastly, on the differences between securing web pages and securing APIs, which are two very different things if you think about it. Daniel was talking about a unified and collaborative approach to modern tools and processes that you need to monitor real-time web applications and APIs for security threats. So real complicated stuff when you start trying to sort out exactly how those things are impacting software and applications and APIs and all that stuff, and then all the sort of backfill on that and the chain of events that goes into that stuff. On Business Security Weekly number 219, Paul, Jason, and Matt had Travis Isaacson, the Technical Expertise Manager at Detectify, who was on to talk about how to measure success in AppSec and how to define the success of new tools. Something that everybody always gets interested in, because one of the first questions out of anytime you have a consulting job and you recommend a tool, the next question is, how do I measure ROI on this thing? It's going to cost this much. How are we sure it's going to do what we think it's going to do? And in the second segment, 3 effective ways to improve your internal communication to boost employee engagement, 4 immediate measures to execute after a cyber attack, 17 cyber insurance application questions you'll need to answer, and other stories. I really like that 4 immediate measures to execute after a cyber attack story. I've been asked about that a lot lately. People asking about, what is incident response? What kind of stuff should we be doing? Yeah, we have no staff. Yeah, we have no plan. Yeah, and we used to audit. Almost everything we used to audit started with incident response, because that was really the first question I usually asked, which was, okay, this just happened, go. What do you do first? And a lot of times everybody looked at you blankly, and that was a bad sign. On Enterprise Security Weekly 230, Adrian, Paul, and Tyler Shields brought on Stephen Newman, the Vice President of Product Marketing for Threat Insight at Gigamon, who was talking about network detection and response solutions and the pros and cons of some of those. And, of course, obviously, there's a lot of network detection tools out there. All of them, of course, if you read the literature, claim to be amazing, to be AI-enabled, smart, whatever the current buzzword is. But the reality is, when you get those tools, there's also a lot of testing that you need to do to determine if they're going to be effective in what you want to do. And they had a news segment as a second segment. In the third segment, 3 guests: Derek Mankey, the Chief of Security Insights and Global Threat Alliances at Fortinet FortiGuard Labs; Kevin Gallagher, the CRO of Invicta Security, and Michael Daniel, the president and CEO at Cyber Threat Alliance, joined the host to talk about behind the scenes of the cyber fight, taking down cyber criminal supply chains, taking down ransomware gangs, and more about that. So a pretty interesting segment there. On Security and Compliance Weekly number 75, Flea, Josh, and Scott were talking with Doug Landel, the CEO at Lentigo, I think it's Lentigo, about doing business with the federal government. Really scary, kids. Anytime you go down that road, I used to do consulting for that as well, and how it impacts storing, processing, and transmitting any sensitive data. They talked about NIST 853, 800-171, and how controls are changing into this new thing that you started seeing bandied about called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Framework. So that some of that is coming out of NIST, and it's coming out of executive orders from President Joe Biden in response to SolarWinds. So you're seeing a lot of sort of changes coming, I think, in that doing business with the federal government stuff. And that's always a big challenge for everybody who's already doing business with the federal government or anybody who wants to do business with the federal government. In a second segment, well, as you might guess, this thing continued for a while and probably would have continued for a while more if the timer didn't run out. On Security Weekly News number 123, Jason Wood returned and was talking about the FBI doing magic tricks or whatever it was they did to recover the Bitcoin that was paid by Colonial Pipeline to DarkSide in the ransomware attack. Somehow they got all the money back. Somehow. Good job, FBI. Sneaky, though. Really sneaky. I'm going to talk about that some more in a bit. On Paul's Security Weekly number 698 last night, our friend Gene Eric joined the crew. Gene is a senior product officer at Xscape Inc. The subject was the OpenWRT project. If you aren't familiar with that, OpenWRT is a popular tool that is used to embed particularly Linux operating systems, and that you want to put on various devices. It's used to develop everything from enterprise features to IoT to home gateways, pretty much anything where you need an operating system and you have a chipset and you want to put the operating system on the chipset. So you see people putting Windows and things in that stuff as well. In the second segment, Rob Gurzeev, the CEO and co-founder at Psycognito, joined in to talk about the attack surface, a term we use a lot, but what does that actually mean? So there was kind of an interesting conversation there. Everybody jumps on these buzzword bandwagons, and we all like to say attack surface. But, what is the difference between the attack surface protection and attack surface management and all these kind of things? So it's very easy to lump everything together. Interesting segment. And, of course, in the third segment, the security news. So my favorite threat of the week, then, is going to be the virtual thin blue line. I have always worked with law enforcement, and I've trained law enforcement for a long time in forensics. I trained law enforcement in networking, security, and don't get me wrong, I am not going to bash the FBI or anyone else for doing a good job and getting bad people any way they can. Because that is what they're there for, and I think a lot of law enforcement people often feel stymied by rules and regs that say, you can't go get this guy even though this person is really terrible and they're doing really terrible things. But I think there's a complicated day coming. So this is not about, and I'll probably say it several times, it's not about bashing law enforcement for what they did in this Colonial Pipeline thing. And I don't want to get into any of the physical world politics or the controversies that are facing all civilians, law enforcement, and so on. Not that they're not important, but I just want to stay out of that for this little diatribe. The world has evolved from the days of a police officer asking me if I knew what this is, and it was a floppy disk they found in a car, to a world where law enforcement agencies have had to ramp up their cybercrime units with specialists and experts because they get calls and questions and crime that is being effected on their citizens and their constituents who pay their paychecks. And citizens get frustrated with that when they're getting ripped off and they're getting ransomware and they're getting targeted. So, I have no problem with that. So what is my gripe? Well, when I saw that FBI story about the Bitcoins and the ransomware bad guys getting outmaneuvered, that made me want to cheer, right? Because that sounded like, yay, just like when you see them take down a child porn ring or something like that. But the paranoid part of my brain started wondering, where does all that end? And again, no slight to the FBI. So you know by now I'm a huge Philip K. Dick fan, and Minority Report is a short story that he wrote back in the 60s that was later made into a so-so movie with Tom Cruise, which is the best rating I'll ever give a Tom Cruise movie. Sorry, Tom. The story was basically, though, a metaphor for where do you draw the line. And that was sort of, if there was ever a theme in Philip K. Dick's work, it was really often about where do you draw the line. I mean, Blade Runner, where do you draw the line? Scanner Darkly, where do you draw the line? Minority Report. All of those things were examinations of just how far you can take something before it crosses some sort of line. I mean, what if you had the ability to predict future crime? That's the main theme of Minority Report. Where do you draw the line? I mean, should you do it? Should you go arrest people because they are going to perform a crime? I mean, if you exclude all the sort of sci-fi kind of stuff in Minority Report, and you said, what if it was just a statistical model? It was a profile. Should you do it? So the threat to me here is more about where does this stop with the FBI, not what you're doing right now. I mean, so obviously they had some way to get the private keys for the wallet that contained the Bitcoin. And they extracted the Bitcoin in between when the ransom was paid into the wallet, when the key was returned to Colonial, and before DarkSide could transfer the coins out of the wallet to Never Never Land. So did they hack it? Did they have a mole? Did they do something else? Did they have a back door into Bitcoin? Sounds like a Hollywood movie. And we probably won't ever know exactly how it was done. And again, I'm not faulting what they did or how they did it. I think it was great. I was just using it as a jumping off point to wonder where it ends, or where's the line. The controversy about hacking back has been around a while, and a lot of undercover police work has probably been going on since, the time some guy in the Sumerian Empire tried to sell some stolen chickpeas to an undercover officer. But the virtual world opens up this whole new avenue of dark water in terms of what is okay and what is going to be okay. I mean, do we end up in some kind of Philip K. Dick Never Never Land where law enforcement is predicting what we will do when we go out today, and they're predicting I'll speed or that I'll drive intoxicated or whatever. And I mean, everybody's trying to out-hack each other. So I hire my hackers to hack your hackers, and your hackers are hacking back because I tried to hack you, and we're all law enforcement. Probably. I mean, it sounds kind of fun in a vaguely icky way, but we often find ourselves cheering one action and then finding that action leads to actions that we don't like. I mean, if the FBI steals Bitcoin from Russian hackers, well, yay. But what if someone decides the DEA can steal money from drug dealers? Oh, well, they don't call it stealing, but they already do that. Yeah, they take that money. Well, what if the sheriff of Hasbrat County decides that it's okay to hack your bank account and recover the speeding ticket you didn't pay? Is that okay? You owe money for taxes, so the IRS just sends their hackers after you, and they attack your accounts and drain them. I know. I sound like the ACLU, but maybe that's okay to sound like the ACLU. I mean, I support them. I sure don't like it when they defend the KKK or the Westboro Baptist Church, but those people have free speech rights as well, and I know the ACLU is doing the right thing, even if it is really, really awful. But let's take it a little bit further. Is it okay for the FBI to hack your car to see if you're doing something illegal based on your past behavior? I mean, is that okay? Hack your car and shut it down because they think you might be speeding? I don't know. I'm not accusing anybody. I'm just thinking about all these future dilemmas that are going to arise for these law enforcement agencies in this virtual landscape. I mean, remember jurisdiction? You remember how the sheriff had to stop at the Mexican border, that kind of thing, so the bad guys got away? I mean, that's all out the window. The FBI is charged with domestic security. They hacked something somewhere to take money from Russian ransomware gangsters and returned it to the U.S., So I wonder how they'll deal with it if the Russian Federal Security Service decides an American company is selling products in Russia that violate some law, and they hack the company to recover damages that were assessed in a court that the company never heard of. I don't know. Anyway, congratulations, FBI. You did a great job there. Good hunting. But I do think that we're all going to face a whole new complex world of law enforcement in the not very distant future. That's going to be a wild ride for all of us. So hang on. And now the news. Steam, which is a major gaming platform, if you are unfamiliar with it, it acts like a library to house video games on local devices and connects you back into a sort of video gaming center and provides it's kind of like Amazon for video games. And you can buy them and run them on Steam and whatever. But it can contain profile images, and now those profile images can contain something called SteamHide. SteamHide is a profile image scam, which basically means that memes and other images are coded in a way which allows them to contain a downloader. So when you click on the meme or you click on the profile image, it can actually execute the downloader on your local system, and from that click. The malware then looks for privileges, and if it has enough, it copies itself into the local app data folder and adds a registry key so that it persists. The malware apparently does not do much currently, according to the GData team, but they did say that it appears to be a test bed for a future campaign. So once these things get in place, then they can start causing them to do dramatic things. So if you have Steam or Steam is running in any of your networks or whatever, you may want to keep an eye on that kind of stuff. Since we went ahead and started with gaming today, there was a story, FIFA 21, which is a football or soccer, depending on where you live, game from Electronic Arts, and has a large community worldwide, had its source code for its latest version, which is not out yet, stolen in advance of its release date. Hackers apparently made off with the source code and other components of the game this week. Vice Motherboard published the report on Thursday after they got an anonymous tip and a web page. It was an anonymous tip that included a web page cache from June 6th that had the headline, "We sell the FIFA 21 full source code and tools with an asking price of $28 million." The file size was 780 gigabytes, which sounds about right for a game like that. I would like to look at the source code for that game. The page was tipped off to them and had some other evidence that the people really did have the source code. Don't know if it would be worth $28 million to me, but I guess when the North Korean version is released with Kim Jong-il as the star, or Kim Jong-un, sorry, I'm a little dating myself there. But it could be Kim Jong-il. I mean, he could be a football star in FIFA 21. And his son, too. They could both play for the same team. I mean, they're like superstars, right? Well, anyway, I guess we'll see. Apparently, other game data was stolen as well. EA did say that no user information had appeared to have been stolen, but they always say that. Everybody says that. So Fastly, I had an outage. This was a big story this week. Never heard of Fastly? Well, it's an edge services provider. You've probably heard of it by now. And they primarily, their business is they forward traffic to your site by mirroring servers that are going to then reside closer to your users. So this is a common kind of service, especially with e-commerce. All the big kids are doing this these days. Amazon, I pretty much just fill out the list of every company on earth uses this kind of service if they do retail on the internet, or if they do social media, or they do streaming, or any of this kind of stuff, because it's always advantageous to be the closest hop, right, to the person who wants to see the content. So apparently a bug fix was put out to the conf on 8th of June, and the fix basically did everything you don't want. At 9:47 UTC, everything went down. Like that time you forgot that ACLs read from the top down, and you put deny all as the first rule because you were feeling like, I'm going to enact some security, and committed the update. Yeah, not that ever happens. No way. Anyway, at 9:48, well, they described it, and this is the last thing you ever want to see on a ticket: a global disruption. Global disruption. And I'm sure there were some people there at 2 a.m. going, what's it? The ticket just came in. What is it? And it's, it says global disruption. That's a bad way to start your day. Anyway, at 10:27, and these are UTC times, and the company's in San Francisco. But at 10:27, they figured it out. So good job, team. I mean, I would have still been trying to get the coffee grinder to work by then. And at 10:36, things started to come back up. By 12:35, they basically reported the incident was resolved. So time for a few morning drinks and, I guess deal with the next issue. But I guess this does just show how we're rapidly moving toward a sort of mesh of things, and also that we probably can survive them. And two, someone is doing their incident response pretty well. I mean, that's good job. There were several stories this week, and some shows covered this as well. Security and Compliance Weekly in particular was dealing with this, but President Joe Biden wrote an executive order in response to the SolarWinds breach, and this is rapidly moving towards this new regulations and standards for government-regulated industries. The new set of directives is targeting the pipeline industry currently, based on this Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack. And we've all talked a lot about that lately, so I won't go back through it again. But SolarWinds and Colonial, and also JBS Meats, underscore the risk in our critical infrastructure to these sort of attacks. I mean, meat is a critical infrastructure, right? I mean, if you have meat, oil, and network scanning, you're pretty much good to go. I mean, all you need is an Airstream trailer and a Zippo lighter, and you'll survive the apocalypse. I mean, what else could you ask for? But the latest is adding the pipeline industry to standards already in place for the nuclear industry and the electric industry standards that had been put in place previously. Apparently, pipelines are regulated by the TSA, so pretty soon you'll probably have to take off your shoes to pump gas, but I digress. The new standards issued in May include a designated cybersecurity coordinator who's to be available 24/7. Incidents must be reported to the CISA, including potential incidents, mandatory cybersecurity control review, and gap reporting, and identification and remediation measures, and all the results have to be reported to TSA and CISA within 30 days. Starts to sound a lot more like SOX and HIPAA and some of these other things. So don't be surprised if this starts expanding to other government-controlled industries pretty soon. The Department of Justice has elevated ransomware now to the status of terrorism. After the Colonial Pipeline attack, nothing gets people worked up like telling them there's no more gasoline. The attack, which left a lot of Americans being forced to fill their swimming pools, plastic bins, their shoes, plastic pails, and even in some cases empty 40s with gasoline in order to hoard more effectively, was fairly scary and resulted in both attacks on DarkSide by the FBI and is now resulting in ransomware being declared an act of terrorism, which means future ransomware attacks could result in all sorts of action by components of the U.S. government if their previous responses to acts of terrorism are any indication of what they might do in the future. Siloscape is malware that targets Kubernetes clusters and was reported by Unit 42 as having been active for about a year. The malware targets Windows containers that have certain vulnerabilities in them and uses that as a basis to then compromise the Kubernetes cluster. This allows it to achieve code execution status on the Kubernetes code that supports the entire cluster. Then it goes out and probes the nodes in the cluster to see if it can be spread to all of those nodes as well. Once the spread is done, it starts trying to uplink to a command and control server, which is in a .onion domain using IRC over Tor. Once that's established, it waits for commands. So it kind of acts like a botnet. Basically, it appears to be the beginning of some kind of new campaign, and based on the design, should be able to do pretty much anything that it wants once these compromises are in place. So it's a lot, like TrickBot, Emotet type of attacks, but now it's targeting Kubernetes clusters, which means that out there, in the near future, it'll probably be some sort of malware as a service type thing. In the category of, oh no, not this again, TikTok introduced a new privacy policy to users on Wednesday. The new section of the policy said that the popular video app may now collect biometric identifiers and biometric information from the users. That means that everything in the video can be scanned and evaluated to determine who is in the video and where the video is being shot. It specifically states it may collect face prints and voice prints. I think they were already collecting background information and things like that. Now, this is nothing new. If you use social media, use apps, use pretty much anything in the world. If you go shopping on Amazon, all your data is being rapidly collected, folded, spindled, and probably mutilated. And, for the children and all that. And only a small number of U.S. states have actually enacted biometric privacy laws. Former U.S. President Donald Trump had a real go at TikTok a few years ago and tried to block, ban, suppress all sorts of things, the Chinese-controlled app, for the children. But TikTok has always maintained a solid stance that they do not, under any circumstances, give your data to the Chinese government. No way, no how. And they even went so far as to say they would not do that even if the Chinese government asked. Now, I will say, when the Chinese government asks you to do something and you're based in China, you pretty much do it. or they will find somebody who will, or you'll be assembling radioactive tractor parts in Uyghurastan before the day's out. But you know, it's social media. If you had privacy concerns, you probably wouldn't be posting pictures of your cool new passwords on there in the first place. And, you know, and your cousin's in the background who's being hunted by Chinese drones. I wouldn't worry. VMware vCenter is under active attack. Bad packets reported on June 3rd that mass scanning was ongoing looking for vSphere hosts that were vulnerable to remote code execution vulnerability. The CVE scored 9.8 and is basically an input validation error that in the virtual SAN health check plugin. So that's part of that vCenter stuff, and in which it can allow a remote code execution with root privilege on the operating system hosting vCenter server. VMware did issue an emergency patch on the 25th of May, but patching VMware is not something you just, say, hey, let's run the patch, or you may end up like Fastly. And many people have probably not yet patched those systems, and they are exposed. Bad packets detected 14,858 exposed vCenter servers. They were not vulnerable necessarily, but this was how many servers they detected in their scan. So if you're running vCenter and you're exposing it to the internet, you may want to patch it up or mitigate it some other way, like don't expose it. And finally, Jeff Bezos announced that he would be on the first Blue Origin rocket to space. Yep, he's going. Imagine that. The new billionaire. It's a new billionaire must-have. If you are a new billionaire out there and you're listening, please send me some money because I need to buy a house. But every billionaire now has to have a space rocket. Jeff, buy me a house, okay? I'll say good things about you after that. How many super yachts can one person have? So you got to go to space. I offered to go along. And they told me that they only need space for red shirts and paying customers. So red shirts only applies to the original series, but you get the idea. Anyway, as Jeff, Elon, Richard, and probably some other billionaires we haven't heard of yet work on how to sell space flight to other people, well, the rest of us can only hope that one day flying to the moon and back will be the price of an Uber. I mean, if you thought Grubhub delivery was slow in New York, wait until Space Uber Eats has to bring you something up to the bar in orbit. I mean, anyway, the flight is scheduled for the 20th of July. I figure pretty soon Amazon will just shoot your packages at your home from above because terminal velocity is that's the fastest delivery anywhere, right? Amazon Mega Prime Space coming soon. And that's the news wrap-up for the week of 6 June 2021 in the declining time of plague. Listen to the real science, not people who will tell you you'll become a magnet from vaccines. Really? Oh, my God. See you next time on Security Weekly News.